Sex with anybody but me.
Nobody but you, huh?
Nobody but me.
Oh, yeah, we can put that.
You think Rose is still coming?
Does your shirt say something?
Yeah, she's coming. She's getting her coffee.
Where'd you get it?
I don't want to get in trouble.
Should you leave a lie?
Good morning.
There she is. I just said.
I am alive. Who is this person? We have a
I am
visitor.
alive.
We have a visitor.
The prodigal daughter.
It's summer. It's summer.
See, I told you I'd been proselyte.
To live
I invited, I
She's gonna
had
talk
her
to
to see her
somebody
last
about
night. She
cooking.
told me there's this nice little Presbyterian church on Mill Street. Y'all come sometime.
I told her you knew more
She
about
did.
being
It
on
worked.
tonight.
She's been here a lot longer than you have.
That's right.
Is that right enough for you?
Not lately. Not lately. I have
Yeah, she's gonna have to
Well,
She's been having to. She's been out rounding up cattle and everything else.
all right.
the owners were and
I'll call us
everything.
to
Mike knows more about it.
a semblance of focus. All right, we're back on, continuing on in the life of David. So, the last couple of weeks have been a little bit heavy, right?
Yeah.
All sorts of craziness in David's life. Finally, we get kind of, unfortunately, it's an eye in the center of the storm, eye of the storm, but it is a moment of kind of clarity, peace, and good stuff. So, that's awesome. Any questions up to this point? Where are we? Or any questions first?
Can you recap the last 7 months?
I was just gonna do that a little bit. So,
Yeah, would you give a quick summary?
yeah,
You need to go back on YouTube. Exactly.
so David has been on
He
the
can't
run.
go back to December, I'm
Right.
sorry.
David's been on the run, or was on the run from Saul for multiple years. While he was out and about, he was gathering around himself these, what eventually became the mighty men. They kind of started out as scallywags and just nobodies, and they are now kind of his fighting force who are loyal to him and things are good. He had multiple opportunities to kill Saul, but he did not take it. In fact, he used it as an opportunity to say, hey, why are you chasing me? Saul eventually does die because David says, God's going to take care of it. Saul dies because he and the Philistines face off. Israel and the Philistines face off. That battle goes very poorly for Israel. Saul and most of his sons die, all but Mephibosheth. No, I'm sorry. No, Mephibosheth. We'll talk about here. Ishbaal.
Get these right now.
I know, because I know you're taking notes. Ishbaal
Yeah.
gets crowned by Abner up in the north. David gets crowned in Judah by Judah in Hebron. Okay, and his general is Joab, even though he's kind of a caustic person. But there you go. Things happen. Eventually, Abner is sick of civil war, and he comes to David and says, okay, I've got all the elders of Israel on my side. We're going to crown you the king. We're done with Ishbaal. He does that, but afterwards, Joab kills Abner because Abner had killed Joab's brother. It's all very tawdry, right? Not
Like a
tawdry.
soap opera.
It is. It really is.
Very
Like a-
much.
Or Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much that that same thing. So, those of you who watch that are
Sounds
excited.
like
Yeah.
Hatfields and
Fire
McCoy,
and ice,
isn't it?
All right. So, yeah. So that's kind of where we are. Any questions? Okay. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron. Again, that's where he's stationed. And said, look, we are your bone and flesh. For some time while Saul was king over us, it was you who led out Israel and brought it in. And Yahweh, the Lord, said to you, it is you who shall be a shepherd of my people Israel. you who shall be ruler over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign. He reigned for 40 years. At Hebron, he reigned over Judah for 7 years and 6 months, and at Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah for 31 years. So he changes his capital from Hebron to Jerusalem, which is the next story. So the king and his men marched to Jerusalem against the Jebusites. So Jerusalem was called Jebus at the time and was held by the Jebusites. In fact, Jerusalem at this point had never been held by the Israelites at all. But look where it is. It's not quite center, but as far as kind of the more fertile areas of the Holy Land, it's right smack in the middle. It's also kind of right smack in the middle of the area of Judah and the areas of Israel. So he's just brought, all of the tribes have come back together after a probably 7-year civil war. So this sort of central, on the border between the two areas, is probably a really good place to have a capital, right? Because you're right in the middle. Another thing that kind of is interesting about Jerusalem is it was a walled city, as most of these were, but it was a very well-walled city. Here's the city of David, so this is the original. The whole thing is on top of a hill. So what's the best defensible position? Top of the hill, high ground, right? So this is a great place. Anybody who comes to you has to come up to you. So they're working against gravity. You have a better vantage point on them. What's more, what is the way that you defeat a city in these days? A siege, right? So you surround the city, and what's the purpose of a siege?
Cut off all supplies. Food, things like
Right? Guess what Jerusalem has? There's a spring.
that.
There's a spring right in the middle of the city. And there's some caves and stuff like that, but they're fairly well hidden and they're pretty tough to navigate. But there's a spring in the middle, so at least water. You can last much longer without food, but without water, you're dead in a couple days. There's a constant supply of water. So Jerusalem is a great place to make a capital. One of the reasons why it's continuing to be fought over, right? There's arguments about who has rights to Jerusalem, all that sort of stuff. All right. The inhabitants of the land, Jebusites, said to David, "You will not come in here. Even the blind and the lame will turn you back." So what they're saying from probably the top of the wall, a la French, go away, French is not only are you not going to defeat us, but the lame and the sick, they're like our first defense, and they're going to take you down because it's impossible to defeat this city, right? Thinking David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion. Zion is another name for it, which is now the city of David. David had said on that day, "Whoever wishes to strike down the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind, those whom David hates." So he uses that taunt against them and says, all right, so this is the plan. There's this spring, remember? Probably they had some inside intelligence that this is how you get to the spring, this is how you go up, and it was very difficult. It was probably just a couple man strike force basically, who goes in here because you have to, like at the end, there's a long sort of crevasse and you have to kind of work your way up, right? So most of the army were kind of surrounding and kind of distracting while a few of them slip in. Yep. Go up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind. Therefore it is said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. David occupied the stronghold and named it the city of David. David built the city all around from Millo on inwards. David became greater and greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. So, he takes this on. By some accounts, it was actually Joab who kind of redeems himself by being the guy who does this. He then becomes, kind of reinstates himself because of that. So they take Jerusalem. It's the central position. It's great.
Is the Ark of the Covenant with them?
Not yet. No, it's still in Jubash, Gilead, somewhere here-ish. I don't remember exactly where it is. But yeah, it's been moved around a couple of times, but it's still out there. But that's a good one. First, David makes some peace with some of the other areas around him. Once they see that he's taken Jerusalem, he's now in charge of this whole area. All of the tribes are now connected. King Hiram of Tyre sent messengers to David along with cedar trees and carpenters and masons who built David a house. Because King Hiram of Tyre says, hey, let's get in good with this warlord king of the Israelites. David then perceived that the Lord had established him king over Israel and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of the people of Israel. In Jerusalem, after he came from Hebron, David took more concubines and wives, and more sons and daughters were born to David. And there's a list of all of those sons. Again, going back to partially this is you can have as many wives as you can afford. Partially this is David kind of had a thing for women. Partially this is statecraft and, I'm going to marry your daughter so you don't attack me, that sort of stuff. So the Philistines hear that David has been anointed king over all of Israel, and they go up to attack him, right? They've just taken out Saul. Well, not just taken out, but not too long ago they took out Saul. So they're going to do the same to David. Well, he defeats them. He also, they try multiple times. They go through the Rephaim Valley, which I believe is up in this area. It's a area that is kind of easy to sneak into. It's a lot of crevasses and it's kind of a rough terrain, but it's fairly easy to kind of infiltrate, but it's not terribly easy to infiltrate as a large army. Also, the Israelites know this land. This is their backyard, right? So multiple times the Philistines are defeated. One of the times, again, David asks for the Lord's guidance, right? And the Lord says, circle around them. And when you hear the sound of warriors marching in the trees, that's when you attack. And the Lord has given them into your hands, and he defeats them. Because he hears the sound of an army attacking, whatever that means, right? Maybe it's just the wind was coming through the trees. Maybe there's an angelic army that is coming down and being part of that. But he wins a lot. Then, now that he has this great city, right? He builds this great palace for himself, so he says, I am going to bring the Ark of the Covenant. So he brings the Ark of the Covenant in, makes the intention, I'm going to plug this in because it's apparently not plugged in. No, that's not you. I've got a weird thing. His original intention is he has a house of cedar, which is really impressive at the time. So he's going to build God a house of cedar. And God says, I've been in a tabernacle all this time. Was there a single time that I asked any of the leaders that I had chosen, make me a house? No, that's fine. Just let me, it'll be good. I can be in Jerusalem, that's fine. But don't build me a house. Your son will build me a house. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? God says, I'm going to make you a house. I'm going to build a dynasty, and that dynasty will last forever. To David. So instead of building God a house, God builds David a house. There's this sort of reversal sort of thing. There's a great celebration when David brings the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, though it is wrought with a little bit of trouble. This is the part where they're bringing the Ark of the Covenant from somewhere, wherever it was, I don't recall. And they build a new cart, and they put the Ark of the Covenant on, and they're bringing it in. And there are a couple of people kind of leading it, a couple of people who are not priests. And the cart stumbles a little bit, and Uzziah, who is a man who is there right next to it, holds it up, and he's struck dead.
Why did they, I never have understood that. He was trying to keep it from falling
Yeah.
off, and he gets killed for it.
Well, here's the thing. This is back to what is the Ark of the Covenant?
It's holy.
That's where
Yeah,
God
it's-
lives.
Is where God lives. It's holy, right?
But somebody had to put it on the card.
But here's the thing. They had, okay, so think to our Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? There's the poles. So you stick the poles through so you don't touch the thing. You can lift it up. You're just touching wood. You're not touching the Ark of the Covenant. That's okay. Usually, almost always, and this is probably the case here, priests were the one who did it. So they go through all of the rites of purification. They make sure that they are holy, that they are righteous. All of their sin has been paid for. Why is that important?
They're pure.
So that they're pure. Because God is pure and holy. God is immensely powerful, and this is very, very clear as you read through the law. God is very, very, very powerful. Read through Leviticus. It's all of these Levitical laws, all of these laws specifically for the priests. It's for everybody else to a certain extent, but specifically for the priests, so they know exactly this is something that will make you unclean. Now that could be a sinful act, or it could just be you are unclean because maybe you touched a dead body. You are now unclean for a certain amount of time. That, if it's not an actual sin, an act that you do, you don't have to make a blood sacrifice, but you do have to, so if you touch a body, you have to wait for a certain amount of time, then you ritually cleanse yourself, just use water, and you clean yourself, now you're ritually clean.
So
Now-
this guy was just a common
Yeah.
everyday worker bee.
Exactly.
And just happened to be there, or did he want to help?
He wanted to help,
Mhm.
but
He wasn't a
clearly
priest.
he was not ritually clean.
Right.
So here's the thing, and it's not a God said, "Oh, you did this, boom, you're dead." That's not what's going on here. What it is once again proof positive that God is powerful. Now, a great analogy that I've heard is the sun. Okay? So the sun is very powerful, right? You get in a rocket ship and you fly towards the sun, what's going to happen?
I know.
When you burn up, does the sun go, ha ha ha, that rocket ship?
Maybe.
That Rose, I don't know. She's in a rocket ship and I'm not so sure about her. I'm going to burn her up. No. It's that the sun is so immensely powerful that the rocket ship, which has all sorts of imperfections and cannot deal with the heat of the sun, implodes. Same thing, Uzziah was not ritually clean. So he touches this thing, which is immensely pure, and what happens? He dies. Because in the presence of God, any uncleanness, any sin evaporates.
How did
We
he die?
cannot
Did
deal
it
with
say, how does it say
He
he
just-
died? You just,
He is struck dead, I think.
God would have said
Let's
that.
Now,
see.
She
are
said
they
that.
having a shortage of priests in this day and age? Because it seems to me like they should have had more
Well,
around.
You may remember that Saul took out most of the active priests at Nob. So yeah, so there's a little bit of a problem with a priest supply at that point, because it was part of you had to be part of the Levitical tribe, but you also had sort of the priestly family within that that were actually called to serve, and that was, you don't go to, correspondence school to learn how to be a priest. This is something that you have to.
Not an online
Right. But it's a
degree.
it's a long process to get there.
Okay.
And we're not that far after the massacre of Nam, so I think that may be part of it, that there's not a huge amount. Up to this point, since Nam, the only priest that we've heard of is the guy that starts with A that comes to David. That's the only priest that we've heard of. So that may be part of it, is that there's not too many priests. God struck him there because he reached out his hand to the ark. And he died there beside the ark of God.
So he didn't disappear, really, just
No, he just,
instantaneous.
he's dead. Yeah, because he's not pure, he's not clean, he has not gone through the proper things to make him where he can be in the presence of God and not immediately struck down. You may remember, so under normal circumstances, if the Ark of the Covenant is in the tabernacle or in the temple, only one person, one time a year, the high priest, on the Day of Atonement, is allowed to go into the presence of God. And they put bells on his robes and they tied a rope to his leg, so that if, after making a sacrifice of 2 bulls, 1 goat, and 1 gets to go off into the wilderness, after making all of these gifts of atonement for himself and for the people, if he is found to be not holy and is struck down, they can pull him on that. Right? So we're talking about the living God. We're talking about immense power. It's not a capricious, oh, you touched my thing, I'm going to kill you. It is, you touch fire, you're gonna get burned.
Okay, I got a question.
Yes.
It may sound silly.
No, that's not.
We don't know where the Ark of the Covenant is. It's not in a warehouse where Indiana Jones put it, or anybody
I mean,
else.
yeah, that's the best guess that
Okay.
you got, right?
It's lost.
Mm-hmm.
God's not still in it.
No. And in fact, actually, some biblical scholars argue that, so the Ark of the Covenant gets moved eventually to Jerusalem. There's a 3-month period after Uzziah is struck down that David says, no, maybe we should rethink this. And they set up the tabernacle there. And things go really well where they set up the tabernacle. So he says, okay, maybe we'll bring it into Jerusalem. And they eventually bring it to Jerusalem. It stays there until when? Anybody know? Until the Babylonian exile. Oh, yes, the Babylonian exile. So Babylon finally defeats the southern kingdom of Judah. They tear down the temple. They ransack it. They take all of the important things and this big golden box they take with them. And that's when it goes. Now, some biblical scholars look at, there's a few verses where it indicates that before that, during the time of the prophets, when they're warning Israel and Judah that bad things are going to happen unless they become righteous, unless they turn back towards God, there is a verse or two, I believe, that says, or that indicates that God says, fine, my presence won't be there anymore. I am taking my presence away from Jerusalem, taking my hedge of protection away, but God's actual presence leaves the Ark of the Covenant. So it's not there when the Ark is stolen. Because we don't have any accounts where, and the Babylonians lost 37 people because
Right,
they
they
touched the
touched it.
thing, right? There's nothing like that. So that's part of it is, well, it's lost, but
No big deal.
It's
yeah,
just a box
because
right now.
and so there's that. So there's Old Testament. There's that answer. also, and this kind of sums up what we're talking about here, God says to David, I will set up a house for you, and you will have someone on the throne for all time.
So
Well, the
did
exile
Jesus
happens,
sort
that
of
doesn't-
take the place of
Yes.
the ark? I mean,
Right. So God chose to give his presence to us in a person, Jesus Christ. The Son of David, who is the eternal King, who's the eternal prophet, he's the eternal presence of God. And there's, in Hebrews, you may remember, there's a lot of sort of tabernacle, priesthood, that kind of talk, suggesting that all of that old order of the tabernacle, of the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God, the curtain that separates the presence of God from the people, all of that was a foreshadowing of what Jesus would do. You remember on the cross when he died, what happened to that?
the veil was torn too.
Yeah, the veil, which at this point was like a thick curtain, tore from top to bottom. And the presence of God, the thing that separated the Holy of Holies, the presence of God from his people, is no more. The presence of God is among men. And then on Pentecost, what happens? The very Spirit of God is
Holy
poured
Spirit.
upon all flesh. Right? It didn't matter if you were a priest. It didn't matter if you were holy, even. Right? The Holy Spirit indwells them and us with that same presence and power of God.
Priesthood of all believers.
We are the priesthood of all believers, right? Because we have a high priest who has entered into the Holy of Holies. Not the copy in the temple. But our holy high priest has entered into the actual presence of God. The transdimensional throne room of the living God. He's entered into that place and sits now at the right hand of God. At God's metaphorical right hand, because he doesn't have a real right hand. But Jesus, who does have a right hand and a left hand and all things, sits in that presence of God. And when we pray, when we ask for forgiveness, Jesus passes those prayers on to the living God. We have direct access. We are priests because we are those who have direct access to the presence of God through Jesus Christ. We also have that final atoning sacrifice so that all of us may be clean. So that when we reach up to the ark and we touch the presence of God, that uncleanness in us does not immediately cause us to die. But we are able to be in the presence of God. So this is, Jesus in many ways is the fulfillment of all of this. One last story, real quick, before we finish up. Remember Mephibosheth? Yes, of course we remember Mephibosheth. For those of you who work here and don't remember, of course, Mephibosheth was one of the grandsons of Saul. One of Jonathan's sons. At the Battle of Gilboa, at the Battle of Gilboa, when Saul and Jonathan and two of the older brothers all die, word gets back to Gibeon, and the nursemaid of Mephibosheth, who's 5 years old at this point, probably weaning, maybe just weaned, about that, so he's a little kid, right? She hears this and goes, uh-oh, we better take off. She runs, she falls, his legs are broken. Medical technology is not where it is now, obviously, right? So this kid is on crutches for the rest of his life. After David makes his capital Jerusalem, brings the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle to there, he says, I made covenant with Jonathan that I would be faithful to him and his line. That I wouldn't do what all the other kings, the normal way, if there was a king that was not, if their father was not the king, and sometimes if their father was the king, the normal practice was kill all the descendants of the previous king, so there's no argument about who's rightfully king. He says, is there anybody still left that's a descendant of Saul? And they find a lady who was the nursemaid, I believe. And she says, well, there's Mephibosheth. He's living off, somewhere. He's a cripple. He has nothing, during this time, there's nothing he can do but beg. And he says, bring him here. And he raises that now teenager as his own son. He sits there at the table of the king. He is given high favor because he's the descendant of the previous king.
Does he appear in Hebrews?
Mephibosheth?
Mhm.
No, I believe that you're thinking of Melchizedek.
Yeah.
Which is an easy one to...
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's Melchizedek, which is part of the story of Abram, who's this random priest that kind of pops out of nowhere.
Okay.
King of Salem, king of righteousness. No, this is Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, who David says, again, this is part of think of all that David has been through these last years. He's been through civil war, he's been through being chased down for years. Just give me something good, please. And they find Mephibosheth and he shows him kindness. He says, let me reverse this. He actually engages in the same sort of relationship that, remember, David and Saul had at the very beginning. It was like this father-son relationship. But instead of going crazy and trying to kill him, he goes, I'm going to show him kindness. So that's where we're going to end that. David is king in Jerusalem. The Ark of the Covenant has been brought to the city of David, Zion, Jerusalem. And there we are.
Is the spring still in Jerusalem?
Yep. You can still see it, and there's some argument about exactly how they got up and how they were able to get there, partially because it's been 3,000 years, and so there's been some caves change, especially with running water.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's still there.
Which continues to make it very valuable.
Absolutely.
I realized God was in charge. But that, and therefore they won being there. But
Right. Oh,
if you read the current military guides, it says never get caught. Where you can be surrounded like up on top of a mountain.
Well, absolutely.
You can't go anywhere.
It was.
Even though you got water at some point.
Yeah.
This
is.
water ain't gonna, you're not gonna get
No
any.
drones.
Huh?
They didn't
Right.
have
You
drones
can't get to
back
the
then.
bilo from there.
Right, exactly.
To get your food.
In ancient thought, especially,
I
high
got you.
ground was,
We
that's-
got you.
Yeah.
I always
It's
said,
not
make sure
as-
you got a way to
You could sit
Yeah.
there.
turn and run to get away.
But even, I mean,
If you have to.
even not that long ago, think of, some of the battles in World War II. They're storming the beach, and who has the high ground? The Germans. And they've got big guns, and it took a lot of people to take those beaches. Probably was on one of those beaches.
I'm sorry, that was just bothering me the whole time. How about those poor people getting trapped on top of a mountain?
Now, according to ancient thought, that's, when the heaviest artillery that you're really dealing with are javelins.
Yeah.
High ground, it makes sense. All right, let's close in prayer. Lord God, thank you that you are our high priest. Thank you that you let us enter into the presence of God. Thank you that we are able to dance before you and worship you in spirit and in truth. Fill us with your Spirit. Call us to your worship. We pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ, our
I've got the.
We won't like you coming.
I said, 25.
Yes.
You're a fire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got my glasses, I'm going out.